Hey bakers, so while Sarah and I were recording today, we thought we would do an additional little video here answering some frequently asked questions that we've received since launching our mini course on creating and maintaining a sourdough starter. So in this video I'm going to cover just some troubleshooting advice and go through a number of frequently asked questions so that you can be more confident about how to care for your starter. So one question that I'm seeing a lot is, my starter isn't passing the float test, can I still bake with it? And I want to reassure you that you absolutely can. As long as you're seeing really great signs from your starter in terms of a huge rise between feedings, very active bubbling, those are all the best signs that there's activity and life happening in here. The float test is a great additional step to take just to be totally confident that there's a lot of air and gas already trapped in your starter, but it's by no means a make or break test. Another question that I'm seeing quite a lot is, what do I do if I run out of whole wheat flour, or if I don't have whole wheat flour at all right now? And of course, right now as we're seeing shortages of flour in all of our grocery stores, this is a very important question. So what I want to say to start is that let's say you created the starter using whole wheat flour and now you're starting to run out of it and you can't find additional whole wheat flour. There's a couple things you can do here. So keep in mind, you can keep this starter going and keep it healthy using white flour for a while. You can get away with months and months of feedings with just white flour. It's still going to be completely healthy and totally perfect to bake with. Let's say instead you have, maybe you have other kinds of whole grain flours laying around. You have spelt flour or rye flour that you have more of. You can totally use those flours instead, but a word of caution here. So two things. First, if you're transitioning your starter to any kind of different flour or ratio, you want to do this gradually. If you switch too quickly, if you jump just immediately to, I'm not using whole wheat flour, I'm using rye flour, your starter might be okay, but I've seen situations where the starter kind of gets shocked by that. And it's nice to do these transitions a little bit more gradually. So just starting, start dialing back the ratio. I'm going to use 3/4 whole wheat flour and 1/4 rye flour, and then half, and then 3/4. And so you're doing this kind of gradually as you feed the starter. The second thing I want to mention is that different whole grain flours react and behave differently. In my experience, rye flour especially tends to ferment super quick. It's like rocket fuel for starters, which can be excellent, but it's going to change the whole dynamic of your feeding schedule. You might have to adjust your water temperature, your ambient temperature to accommodate that. And so just be cautious as you play around with different kinds of whole grain flours, knowing it's going to change the nature of your starter and your baking schedule. Another frequently asked question I get a lot is, what should my starter smell like? And this is a very difficult question for a few reasons. First of all, if you're cultivating wild yeast in your home, it's going to have its own completely unique aroma and flavor to it. So there's no precise right or wrong way for a starter to smell. It's so unique in that way. That being said, here's a couple of things you might want to look out for, especially if you see your starter struggling. So let's say you go to feed your starter and you take a whiff and it smells extremely strong like nail polish remover. That's probably a sign that your starter is getting too hungry between feedings. You're probably smelling the ethanol that's being produced at that point. Because if you recall, if you take a starter and leave it long enough, it'll start producing lactic acid, which typically has kind of a cheesy aroma. Once that lactic acid starts breaking down, it breaks down into alcohol. And so that's where that very strong nail polish, almost acetone aroma is going to come from. And so that's a sign that your starter is probably getting a little bit too hungry. Other than that, as long as your starter is smelling kind of yeasty, bready, a little bit tangy, you're definitely on the right track. If you're smelling sort of sulfur in your starter, that might be a sign that your water is not high enough quality or is containing some element that you might want to adjust. So that's the one other kind of surefire sign that something's going wrong, is if you get this really pungent sulfuric smell out of your starter. One other question that I'm seeing a lot is, what is this liquid on top of my starter? Oftentimes things change where, let's say we've gotten maybe a little bit lax with our feedings, or a warm front's moved in and suddenly our home is much warmer, and we go to feed our starter and we see a layer of liquid on the top. Sometimes that liquid might be kind of golden or brown in color. Other times it could be even kind of a gray or black color, especially if your starter's been unfed for a while. Basically what that liquid is ethanol. It's also referred to as hooch very commonly. And again, that's just a sign that your starter is mighty hungry. It has run out of food. That lactic acid is producing an alcohol. And so the good thing is, even if you're seeing a dark black liquid on top of your starter, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a goner. I have seen starters that have been abused and unfed for months and months that come right back with a fresh feeding. So it's not a sign that your starter's dead. You have two options here. If you want your starter to have a more sour, pungent flavor profile, then you can actually stir that hooch back into your starter, then discard and then feed again. That's going to keep that alcohol in there, which has a ton of other bacteria in it as well. It's going to make your sourdough starter much more sour. If you prefer not as much sourness, you can pour that ethanol, that hooch off the top, then discard, then feed. It's going to keep your starter a little bit more less acidic, more neutral, and keep it sweeter in flavor as well. Now I want to go through the kind of basic troubleshooting process for if you've been trying to start your starter and it's been a couple of days or a week and you're just not seeing great activity. Here's all the different questions that you might want to ask and try to figure out what element of my system here can I adjust. So right off the bat though, I want to say if it's been less than 5 days or even less than a week, chances are your starter is just taking a little bit longer to develop, and give it a couple of more days, even up to another week. If you're still not seeing good signs, then yeah, let's start doing this troubleshooting, but chances are your starter is just a little bit young. So that's my first word of caution. Other questions you want to ask though, if you're not seeing great activity in your starter, the first one for me is going to be going through your ingredient list. So what kind of water are you using? Are you absolutely sure that it's filtered? Are you using spring water, which can have huge variability? Are you sure that there's no chloride or chlorine in the water that you're feeding with? For me, that's the most important ingredient here. It's the one that can really throw this whole process out of whack. So that might be something you want to adjust. The next question is, let's go through your flours. Are they both high quality flours? Are you using unbleached flour? Are you using a reputable brand that you can be positive it's not going to be completely chocked full of pesticides and other chemicals that are going to inhibit bacterial growth? So that might be another area to adjust, if you can, is switching brands of flour around. See if it just reacts better to a different brand of flour. Other questions you can ask is, what's my temperature like? What temperature is my water when I go to feed it? Is it cold? Is my home on the cold side? Can I adjust either of those things to encourage more fermentation to occur? And so you can use warmer water when you mix if your home is on the cold side. I mean, right now I'm in western South Dakota, and some days here are still getting mighty cold. So I've had to warm my water up a little bit just to encourage more activity. So that's one step you can take. The other is, what's my climate like in terms of where this is resting in my house? Can I find a warmer spot? And that's the other area that you can adjust very easily to encourage a lot more activity in your starter. So I want to encourage all of you. We are here at The Wildlife. I'm here to help you. Send us your questions, post on our Facebook page. That's what this is for us to have a line of communication with you to where we can help you through this process. Other than that though, train yourself to be asking the right questions so that you can do your own troubleshooting at home. It's going to give you more confidence as a baker, and it's incredibly rewarding as well.